you can often be swayed with, oh, there's got to be a quicker way. There's got to be a quicker way to get to an answer. And so you can easily get swayed with other things that are out there. But actually, the quickest way is classical homeopathy, and nothing will convince me otherwise.
Welcome to the Holistic Homeopathy Podcast, Behind the Remedies. Join me as I sit down with homeopaths from around the world to hear their journeys, the moments that shape them, and the remedies and philosophy that inspire their practice. You'll hear honest conversations, real stories, and practical insights into the art and philosophy of homeopathy. I'm your host, Tanya Aroha-Twentyman, homeopath and founder of Holistic Homeopathy. Whether you're new to homeopathy or on your own wellness journey, this is your space to learn, connect, and feel empowered. Let's go. Welcome to our very first episode of the Holistic Homeopathy Podcast, Behind the Remedies. Joining me today is homeopath Sonia Pechner, who stepped away from an international corporate career to follow her calling as a homeopath. Sonia has worked with clients in New Zealand and the Gambia, and most recently spent 2 weeks with Homeopathy for Health in Africa, working alongside Jeremy and Camilla Sherr. She is a committee member of the New Zealand Homeopathic Society and co-manages a holistic health centre in East Auckland. In this conversation, we'll explore Sonia's journey, the experiences that shaped her, and the insights she gained through her work in Africa. Sonia, thank you so much for being here. My very first guest, which makes it pretty special. You were keen to come along.
Thank you so much for having me here, Tanya. So
you're
that's
welcome.
A lovely opportunity.
You're welcome. So first off, I thought it would be nice for our guests to know about your journey to homeopathy. I know a little bit that you've shared with me, but do you want to tell us about how you came to homeopathy, how it's shaped you?
Yeah, I think so. Homeopathy has always been a part of my life, really, since I was a child, but I guess less consciously. So my grandfather used to be what we'd call nowadays a home prescriber for homeopathy, but he lived in India, and every time he'd come over, he always brought his little homeopathy box. And we grew up always being asked questions about how we were feeling, etc. And he'd ask for our symptoms, and then he'd just give us a little pill, and we just loved it. So, and my mother treated us homeopathically growing up, but it wasn't really until I had my own children and my youngest got sick, lots of antibiotics later, and we still weren't getting on top of the problem. Well, we weren't getting to the root of the problem. A friend recommended a homeopath, and we never looked back after that.
Beautiful.
So later on, I knew I wanted to become a homeopath, but it was a challenge trying to extricate myself from a corporate career to completely change things around. But eventually I made that leap. After lots of encouragement from my own homeopaths, I made that leap and moved into homeopathy. So,
Never looked back.
No, I have no regrets whatsoever. It's been incredible.
It's a pretty wild ride at times, though, hey?
It is, but when you feel like you found your calling, nothing will stop you, because I started retraining in my 50s, and a lot of people would be like, why would you change careers in your 50s? It seems so late. And I said, well, 4 years of studying, but I never for a second did I question how long that was going to take, or is it even worth it? Because I knew I'd found my calling. I just knew this is where I needed to be. So yeah, that's what I decided to do.
That's very beautiful. How cool. And so tell me a little bit about how you got to this place of like, I'm going to go to Africa, which a lot of people would be like, no way. I mean, I've thought about it lots of times, and then it's like, oh, it all seems a bit daunting. So how did this opportunity come about?
So I've always wanted to do volunteer work in Africa since I was a teenager. I don't know why, I just always wanted to, but I always wanted to do something meaningful. And then my other career just really didn't seem that meaningful. And then life just got in the way. But when I was doing my studies, we got to see about homeopathy for health. I think it was Rebecca Stirrup who came and talked to us a bit about homeopathy for health in Africa. So that got me intrigued. And then I saw a couple of the homeopathy movies, and in one of them, Homeopathy for Health in Africa, they'd interviewed Camilla and Jeremy, and they'd been present there. And I just knew that that's where I wanted to go. And it just became a goal. And I thought that's exactly what I want. And of course, after COVID, the idea of international travel was a little daunting. But then I saw that they were advertising that they were going to take another cohort in for because they do a professional development program out there, which is what I ultimately went and did. And so I thought, I'm not going to muck around. I just signed up. And I was so glad I did because they only took 4 people last
Oh,
year.
wow.
And and I got accepted right away. So I was just so excited. Yeah,
Mm,
it was like one of those bucket list items that you have, but it was more than that. It's like a dream.
mm.
It was just like fulfilling your dream. So
Uh,
nothing was going to get in my way.
Maybe it would be a good moment to introduce people to the project and just tell us about it a bit more and who Jeremy and Camilla Sherr are. I mean, we know
Yeah.
as homeopaths, we're like
Yes.
fanning them, like, oh, Jeremy and
Yes.
Camilla, like, oh.
Absolutely.
And Sonia and myself and three other homeopaths have just in New Zealand have just started their advanced diploma in homeopathy course with Dynamis that Jeremy and Camilla run, and it's just like, oh, it's amazing. But
Yeah.
I
Mm.
heard you quote something like being working alongside Jeremy is like drinking from a fire hose, drinking water from
Yes.
a fire hose. I was like,
Yes.
wow. But maybe if you tell us
Yes.
a little bit about the project and what they do there and
Yeah. So homeopathy for health in Africa, they've been around since I think 2009. It was set up by Jeremy and Camilla together. So they went in together to set this up. And they currently support, I think, between 15 and 18 clinics. So they do home visits as well as specific clinics in different locations in the northern part of Tanzania. So it's all in the Kilimanjaro region. And they support people from the poorest communities across the northern part of Tanzania. And some of the clinics are set in a hospital setting. So we have a space outside the hospital there where we can see patients. And some of them are just in rooms that people have made available for the clinics. So they've been involved in helping people's health for those 16 years. Initially, Jeremy set it up with the intention of working with people with AIDS,
mm-hmm,
because of course AIDS is a big issue in Africa, and he'd had a lot of success with AIDS using homeopathy. So he thought he could really make a difference in Africa, and he did. So he was able to help a lot of people suffering the side effects of medication that they take, which has helped people through AIDS, but comes with a price.
mm-hmm,
And he has helped people strengthen their immune systems, and people have gone on to live quite productive lives. They always take the antiretrovirals that are recommended and put forward by the doctors, but
sure.
we can support them homeopathically. So that's what they set out to do in the first place. And as their reputation grew, it spread well and truly beyond AIDS people, and it just started to serve the much wider community of people with all sorts of ailments.
Mm. And I saw on their website that you can also donate food parcels too. And I think the beautiful thing about their project is that it's a direct interface with the people that need it. So
Yeah,
there's not a lot of like, well, there's not any of you donate money and it's going towards all these other things. It's like directly goes to the people that need it.
yeah,
And sometimes it is food that's needed. There's no point giving homeopathic remedies if someone's starving, kind of thing. So they just do so much good work, don't they,
yeah,
from
they
in
do.
all of these areas. One thing that I really loved is this whole concept of training people to be homeopaths and therefore you can reach more people, which is a
Mm,
little bit of how you got to be there. I mean, you're already trained as a homeopath, but then, I assume it's been a really big extension of your training. Can you tell me
mm.
about that and some of the
Yeah.
things you've
Yeah,
learned?
so the program itself is really intense. So you see a lot of clients. So there's two aspects to that. One is they train homeopaths that want to come in and do their professional development program with them from overseas or from outside of Tanzania. But the other aspect, and this is one of the things I really love about homeopathy for health in Africa, is they also support the training of local people.
Mm.
And then they help them set up their own clinical practice. So again, that creates that lovely sort of economic circle, really. So you're training people. You're not just feeding people fish, you're teaching them how to fish, really. And so they've got some incredibly capable homeopaths locally in Tanzania. Some stay with the clinic and some can move on and set up their own practices elsewhere. So I really love that about the project. So they provide that training. And the program itself is super intense. Like I said to you before, drinking from a fire hose when you're
Mm.
around Jeremy, by the end of every day, your brain was just exploding with all this knowledge. I mean, how his brain retains all of that, I don't know. But learning from him is incredible because he's also a very gifted teacher.
Mm. And funny, right? He has us cracking up in these dynamics,
Yeah, yeah,
training things like to tell a story, and just next minute he's just in this joke that he's telling you, and yeah, a
yeah,
delightful
yeah.
sense of humor, which really kind of eases things. So, tell me how it was when you first landed in Africa. Like, what was it like?
So I'd never been to Africa before. I have been to poor countries before. As I mentioned, my mother's actually from India, so I've been to India a lot, but never to Africa. So arriving there, we decided we were going to ease our way in by going to Zanzibar first, which is really more of a holiday destination, and it's this beautiful idyllic island in the Indian Ocean. But obviously also still reasonably primitive conditions. But we were staying in a resort, so we were hardly living in primitive conditions. But it's more getting used to the people and the culture and learning about who they really are. I just found the Tanzanian people incredible. They're just such a kind, happy, really loving people. You didn't feel unsafe at all. And then after that, we actually went off to the Arusha region to, again, I wanted to get to understand that, but we actually went on a safari, which was amazing. And then when I came to the clinic, we had our first day in the clinic, and it just blew my mind, really. Do you want me to describe a little bit
Yeah,
what that first
yeah,
day was
and
like?
yeah, and some of the cases, like that touched you or that you really.
Yeah. So the first day we went to what was Jeremy's very first clinic that he set up when he first went to Tanzania. So this is at a hospital outside Kibosho Hospital in Moshi. Moshi is where they're based, which is at the base of the Kilimanjaro.
Mm.
So we went to this hospital, and it's quite an interesting road to get there, which apparently is much better now, but we were flying through the car on the way there. And we were in a sort of clinic area outside the hospital. This is an AIDS hospital normally. So normally all the people who would come to see him there were people who had AIDS. But when we went there on that first day, there were maybe two people who had AIDS. The rest were just people who knew that we were there every Monday. And so all these people are sitting under a tree on a bench waiting, and they are dressed incredibly well. There's so much dignity. These are people who come from the poorest parts of Tanzania, and they dressed incredibly. They're really dressed up to come to the clinic, and they'll sit there all day. You don't get an appointment, you don't book in. We say we're seeing 15 people, and the first 15 basically get a seat, and then they just sit and wait for their turn. And it's hot when we're
Mm.
sitting, we sit outside, but they're far away so that they can't hear, no one can hear what's being said in the consultation. And as soon as one person has finished, the next person comes in. So we would do back-to-back consultations. The people were such a graceful people, really kind. It's a lovely way when you meet Tanzanian people. There's always quite a greeting process. It's very much how's the family and what's going on. So it's a very warm welcome before you even start taking a case. And yeah, the cases were very, very interesting, and they could range from anything, a lot of pain. We would see a lot of people with pain, headaches, chest issues. Pain because they're carrying heavy loads all the time. They work in agriculture. They're carrying heavy things, especially women carrying heavy things around on their heads, on their backs. But then there's also a lot of coughs, blood pressure issues, stomach issues, things like diabetes, obviously, just like everywhere else. What else? Other heart issues. Um, yeah,
And
quite.
many children, like, or was it that tended to be? Because I've
W-
seen they've done work with children and setting up
mm.
like daycare, well, what we would call daycares in our Western world, or kindergartens, or tell me about the children.
So one of the clinics we went to was associated with an NGO that treats, well, that basically takes in traumatized children. So these are
Mm.
children who have suffered unbelievable levels of trauma, often from birth. So this center is a school. They can have the kids come and stay in like a boarding school. Sometimes they'll go home at weekends to either their immediate family or the grandparents or who wherever they can go to. But other times they might just have to stay at the school permanently.
Yeah.
That was quite heartbreaking to hear some of the stories. Honestly, I didn't even want to know what the background was because it was too traumatic to even understand. And then you sit there and you look at it and go, I'm finding it hard to hear the story.
Mm.
How is this child even coping with having been through it? But the great thing was that with homeopathy, we could make a difference there. So to give you an example, one of the biggest issues they had at the school was bedwetting, for instance. Bedwetting is a result of severe trauma. These kids are so terrified of things, the slightest thing can make them wet their beds, they don't sleep well, etc. So you can imagine when you've got 50 children, how many sheets they have to wash all the time and all those sort of things. So even just reducing that, and I know this sounds trivial in the context of broad trauma, but making a small difference like that is phenomenal because that's the sort of thing that helps the kids also through the whole trauma. They learn to adjust to their new lives, their new normal. And incredible just to know how much help you can give them to process the trauma and the results of the effects
Mm.
of that.
And
Yeah.
just to be surrounded by loving adults,
Mm,
that's just massive in itself. To have the nervous system have the message that life is can be safe, life is okay, there's people that we can trust. That's massive in
yeah,
itself, of like regulating all this
yeah.
dysregulation in the nervous system, along with the remedies. Did you find that there were particular remedies that were indicated a lot for the children, or was it a really broad
It
spectrum?
was quite a broad spectrum. So
Mm.
we used noble gas remedies.
Mm.
We used a lot of your polycrest
Okay.
remedies, really. So it was quite interesting. But what was fascinating was sometimes you'd see this very so in homeopathy, when we're looking at remedies, we'll think of keynotes associated with these remedies. In I feel like in the Western world, we don't often see the
Mm.
clear picture like that. In Africa, we did. We would just see these classic symptoms. You're just going, really? This really openly comes up. It was incredible. So you could very quickly pick out the remedy,
Mm.
you know.
Mm.
So yeah, yeah,
Oh, that's so beautiful. Yeah. And so
yeah.
tell me what you found the most challenging thing, first of all, with the environment. Like, I imagine it's hot, and you'd mentioned to me previously when we talked, like in Africa, things just change all the time. So you wake up in the
Yeah.
morning and it's like, well, I don't know, you got no internet, or tell me about that, some of these really challenging moments, both logistically,
Yeah.
physically, emotionally.
Yeah, electricity is not always going to be running, and you don't know when it's going to go out or how long it's going to be out for. And of course, when you have no power, you suddenly realize as a Westerner how much you rely on power, how to charge your phone, your laptop, etc. Yeah, so those are some of the things. But like you just said, every day we'd get up and we'd have a plan. This is how the day was going to run. Didn't always happen that way. Sometimes something could happen to a vehicle or The power was out and we didn't manage to charge all our phones or something overnight. You think you're going to see 15 people at the clinic, but then you have more because they've come from further afield and you're thinking, we can't turn them away. We can't ask them to come back next week. So we'll add those in. Finding a break during the day was hard, but things like I think the electricity, the uncertainty of electricity was probably the most unsettling.
The roads are pretty rough, hey,
Oh,
from
the
some
roads
of the
are
videos
rough.
I've seen.
Yeah, yeah. And
Like,
I kept thinking it was only when you left town, but it's actually all around town. So you have some of the main roads that are okay, but most of the time you're driving on dirt roads. So it's quite exhausting. So we thankfully didn't have to drive too far most days, but even a half-hour drive on bumpy, dusty roads is actually quite exhausting. You don't realize how exhausting it is to constantly be under those circumstances.
mm,
Eating is a whole different thing as well. Buying your food. So we'd go to the markets to buy our food and then cook our food at home. Or if we just couldn't, if it was too hard, we would have to find a place to go out for dinner. But then where do you go? What do you expect in terms of food? Like I say, in Tanzania, people were just so lovely. And you just had to take the attitude of, oh well, what happens, happens.
mm,
And you can only do the best you can. There's no point in going, but I must get this done. You just accept it the way it is.
yeah.
Um, and that's the best way, I think. Like there was not a single day where everything just ran smoothly. There was always something or other that got thrown at us, you
It
know.
must take a lot of tenacity, eh?
I
Like,
think
especially for Jeremy and Camilla that have lived there, and every day you get up in this chaos, and then you have to try and find form within that, or
yeah,
create some change, help the world in some way, which is what they're doing.
totally. I
Mm,
think, and their tenacity has certainly been tested. I mean, for me, 2 weeks, and I'm quite a resilient person, and I'm very tenacious and persevere a lot. By the end of 2 weeks, I was just exhausted with it because you've just constantly got to be thinking of alternatives or how you're going to do something differently, etc. And that's honestly, we were looked after.
mm,
We were babysat, really. Um, but for them to work all of this out, try and establish the clinics, make sure they have the licenses, make sure that they are in line with all the regulations. And who knows what all the regulations are because they'll change and you won't necessarily know what's changed. Making sure that the people know where the clinic is and having people actually turn up. Or I know one day, for instance, the power outage. This became a big issue. The power went out. And so the hospital, this was when we were at the hospital clinic, the hospital had to run its generator. The generator was in a shed, maybe 50 meters away from where we were. And it was like a diesel generator. And it pumped out the most horrific, toxic smoke you could ask for. And we're sitting there going, we just we can't do this. We just cannot sit here absorbing black
mm,
smoke all day long. And we had to ask them to fix the generator or turn it off or something to stop the smoke. And they'd tinker with it and they'd go, oh, it's all fixed now. And it'd be fine for, half an hour. And next thing you knew, there'd be like another bang and we're being suffocated again with black smoke. So that was quite difficult because for some people it makes it hard with breathing and everything. So yeah, we had to make a decision. Do we stop and
mm,
leave and come back another day? And eventually we had to say to the hospital, you either have to stop the generator or we'll have to go away because we can't sit under these conditions because we were outside. We had a roof over our heads and we had a solid wall around the lower part, but it was all open air.
yeah.
So that's one of the examples of the consequences of not having electricity.
Mm,
The hospital then suffers as well because obviously they have machinery to run inside for their patients. So,
yeah.
mm.
Did you find that there were particular remedies that you yourself took and that you needed either for traveling or during the time you were there for upset tummies or?
I I was quite lucky. Well, I don't remember, but I did have to use some for others,
Yeah.
like among our interns
Yeah.
who are all doing it. So, one of them, for instance, had a splinter that none of us could remove. We couldn't get to it anyway, so we just dosed her with some silica,
Mm.
and the next day she was fine.
Wow.
It had all gone.
Beautiful.
So just little things like that. I didn't have any stomach issues because no, I'm quite resilient on that front.
Oh, yeah, good. I just had this thought actually, as parasites, is that a big problem when you're treating people in Africa, and how do they
Yeah.
deal with that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so parasites is a big problem because the drinking water is they don't always get access to drinking water, and then when they do, it's just often full of parasites.
Mm.
And they all like to think that their stomachs have got used to the parasites, but actually they never get used to the parasites. They learn to live with the parasites, but it does impact their whole body.
Okay.
So until you can clear them of parasites, they will continue to get sick and they will continue to have issues going on across their body, really. So you do have to clear the parasites as well. It is an issue.
Yeah. And did Jeremy tend to use remedies for that, or do they use conventional? What do they do for that?
It just integrated it with the case taking,
Yeah,
really.
okay.
Jeremy never prescribes on they've got parasites. It's
Mm,
all part of the totality of symptoms. So he'll
mm,
always look at the overall picture and see what's causing a problem, what needs to what's the core part of the case and how are they being affected. And then in that picture, the homeopathy should help rid
mm.
them of parasites, but he would never prescribe pathologically or
And isn't that beautiful when that's one of the key concepts in homeopathy, is this totality of symptoms along with the individuality. So how does the
yeah,
individual express the imbalance in their body, mind, emotions? And then, but what's the totality? So we don't, like you say, just separate out, oh, the gut's got this thing going on. It's like, well, what else is going on in that picture?
mm,
What informs that? And I've found that when you get a really good constitutional remedy, like the body doesn't need to hold on to those things anymore. Like everything just kind of gets released and it comes back to a place of balance because it's
yeah,
got that message that it needs through the homeopathic remedy.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that is so cool.
yeah. And that's one thing. I mean, Jeremy is so focused on that, and you just have it ingrained and ingrained. And we do at college anyway, but everything we learned at college was just amplified with Jeremy, and he would just drum messages into you about totality of symptoms and helped you identify what are the symptoms that you're really looking at, what really matters in this case, and what you just keep peripherally. I mean, you always look at everything, but
Mm.
it was really important to match the remedy to the symptoms. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, really interesting. So,
mm,
did you find that there's been a particular moment that really stayed with you or has sort of shifted your understanding of your work, or that has sort of
mm.
shaped you in any way? Before we get back to the conversation, if you're enjoying the podcast, I'd love you to follow the show. My goal is to bring you thoughtful conversations about homeopathy, and every follow helps these messages reach more people.
I think that whole experience was really eye-opening. So I felt we learned so much on different levels when we were there. We learned a lot more about really effective case taking. So Jeremy can take a case within, like most of the consultations would take 20 minutes and we'd be prescribing on the spot. Well, that would be my dream to be able to do that. And he had a great way of showing us how he could get through really to all the essential things that he needed to understand without making the patient feel like they weren't being heard. Because you're thinking, oh, 20 minutes, how could he possibly make them feel really hurt and heard and validated? But he does that because he's very good at the case taking side of it. So we learned all about case taking, very much about case management. So in homeopathy, the first prescription is always a challenge, but the toughest prescription sometimes is that second one. And a lot of homeopaths will go, oh, I need to change remedies. And often homeopaths will change remedies too quickly. But we really learned a lot around how to understand how the remedy was working, looking at the direction of cure, and how when you decided to stick with that remedy versus if you did have to make a change. And then if you did have to make a change, making sure that it ties in with your original prescription. But we rarely saw them shifting because the first remedy was usually really well indicated. And you don't shift until it stops doing what it needs to do and something else has surfaced, new symptoms appear. So we learned those sort of things as a lot, the ability to repertorize easier. So at college, for instance, you have a big number of rubrics that you look at, and like maybe 10 rubrics. Well, Jeremy will look up two. And two that are really well indicated, and that, well, usually 2 to 4, but that really well indicated and actually cover the case. But because he knows his remedies so well, he can very quickly look through the list of remedies that has come up and go, right, these are the ones that we need to look at. Let's differentiate between these remedies. So we were very quickly going through our Materia Medica and reading all about the remedies, etc. So you learned a lot about remedies I'd never used really before, like noble gases. I wasn't that familiar with them. Um, yeah, there's like argon. I think it's argon. That's the Peter Pan remedy. With that, I mean, where say an adult is going through life, and they have lots of dreams of flying, or they might be away, but they also are very childish. They just don't want to take life too seriously and just want to play a lot. So I think that's the remedy for that. But those sort of things, I'd never heard of them. Well, I had heard of them, but I just wasn't familiar. But seeing these clear-cut cases where you just think, oh, wow. It was really eye-opening as a homeopath. You just learned a lot.
And the remedy shows itself,
Yes.
like in the context of a very clearly taken case, like if you watch someone else, another very experienced homeopath take the case, often it's like the remedy almost falls out. It's like, how could you not see that remedy? Because there's something so probably intentional, but also, this focus and this ability just to, like you say, put the periphery at the periphery and then get to what's the key thing here. What are we really looking at? And then it's like, yeah, the remedy becomes so obvious. But I think an interesting thing for our listeners to know is that we have, like, the last I heard was like 4,000 remedies or something. Like, we have thousands and thousands and thousands of remedies. And I remember the first time I went to my homeopath and she got out all these books and I was a little bit like, does she not know what she's doing? Because why is she having to look through all these books?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then when you train, you get this appreciation for, oh my goodness, you could never remember that many. So we have our software, we have our books, and we have various ways of understanding people and knowing which remedies they need. But often we do need to go and then read about remedies, and that's part of the care of the case taking that we do. It's not just the consultation, it's the hours you've spent beforehand learning, always learning, a lifelong learning, and then afterwards, like, okay, what is this remedy? What don't I know about this remedy? Even the familiar ones, often we come back to and we're like, wow, I understand natrum mur in such a different way now. Or
Yeah.
the other day we were learning about nat carb and the dynamis, and it's like, oh, I hadn't thought about nat carb in that way. So yeah, it's such a broad and ever growing and changing. Although within that, I think that's the thing you've touched on, is that there's these fundamental concepts that we stay true to, that obviously you saw in Jeremy's work, totality of symptoms, individualization.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me that was really quite it was exactly what I needed. I think coming out of college, you just think this is in the way we now do homeopathy, and then you realize how long it takes you to analyze cases. And homeopaths tend to overthink things a lot, or certainly in their early stages of career, I think. But I loved seeing a really good classical homeopath in action and being able to do it quickly, efficiently, and with a really high success rate.
Mm.
And the reason I say the success rate is because we could see it, because we saw a lot of follow-ups and we had the case notes from the previous, what led up to that prescription and how were they now. And you could see the success. We were bringing blood pressure down, we were bringing diabetes back within the norm. And these people were not on any medication, any conventional medication, because they couldn't access it. It was not affordable to them. So they had no alternatives. But with homeopathy, we managed to bring that within acceptable parameters, and they could carry on living a normal life.
Mm.
Because, of course, with homeopathy, in that case, we're not putting on a band-aid solution. We're not just trying to put them on medication for the rest of their lives. We're bringing their bodies back into balance so that their bodies can do the healing,
Yeah.
So I was so inspired seeing that classical prescribing so effective, and understanding it doesn't have to take hours.
To take a
So
case.
to take a
Doesn't
case
have to
and to
take
analyze the
hours.
case, like within 20
Yeah.
minutes, like I say, take a case, we'd have a remedy. Every single patient walked away with a prescription, that we always knew what we would give them.
Mm.
Um,
I think that's a good point you made too about how often with the second prescription we can jump away too soon,
yeah.
and if we're making progress in the right direction. But I think what happens is we live in such a fast-paced world that people want results like, and it's often interesting to see when you reassess things at that follow-up how much has actually changed. And sometimes it's that there's been like a subtle change within, and then so much changes on the outside. Someone
Yeah.
that was in a job that they hated for years all of a sudden's like, I'm not going to do that. Or like, yeah, there's all
Yes.
this other change that happens, or they just give up the sugar, or like all
Yeah.
sorts of things.
Subtle.
And
You're
if we
right.
jump too quickly away from that remedy because we think that it's small steps in that direction, and we're looking for the big wow, bang, boom, like then something's missed, and it
Yes.
is a journey, it's not a destination. And so I think that's really valuable, that it's stick
Yeah.
with it. Things are moving, things are shifting, things are changing, and there's lessons to be learned in the
Yeah.
process of that too, I think, right?
A lot. Absolutely.
Mm,
100%. I think it's so easy to move away. But we really learned a lot about what it is that you're looking for. And as you said, sometimes it is so subtle. And the challenge can be when your client or your patient is expecting this particular thing to be resolved. But what they don't quite understand is the reason that is unsettled, say your sleep patterns, is because you've actually got all of this going on, and you're seeing some of these, say, emotional issues being resolved. So, suddenly you've decided to change your job, and all of a sudden you can start to sleep better. And they don't understand that changing the job has actually been one of the linchpins. And why did they not change the job before,
mm,
which they had held on to for years? But since they took that remedy, all of a sudden they found it in them to
mm,
make a career change.
mm.
Whereas before, nothing made them change that. And so they lived in this pattern. And so, as homeopaths, I think we see healing happening quite differently, because learning to look at the healing from a holistic perspective is quite different to what we have been conditioned to
Mm,
think, right?
mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah,
healing is in many ways a lot more subtle than we like to think. Sometimes it is that
yeah, for sure.
wow.
Yeah.
And those are incredible situations. But in many ways, I don't know, the more rewarding ones are the ones where you can see the little changes happening to people's lives for their own betterment,
Mm,
and you're subtly seeing some of these things fall away that have held them back or have caused them illness,
yeah.
really, or caused them disease. And so they might go, oh, but I'm still getting these coughs. But you're not getting them as frequently as you used to get, or you're not getting them as intensely as you used to get, or headaches or something. They're not getting them so often. And then one day they just go, oh, actually, you're right. I haven't had it for at least 6 months or something, and
Mm,
but it's so subtle that they haven't even noticed.
mm,
And they might sit there and think, why are you giving me the same remedy again? But actually, you're watching progress. So
yeah.
it's really important for people to understand what health really is,
Mm.
I think.
And I think you forget when you're in that pattern of ill health and then you pop out of it, you forget that where you were. Like
Yes.
I went to the chiropractor the other day and I was in pain again. And I said, I forgot that before I came and saw you, I was like this a lot. And,
Mm.
and then I've had a few adjustments but
Right.
it went away. But then when the pain came back again, I was like, oh, that's right. I remember
Yeah,
this
yeah,
used to
no, yeah.
happen. Your new norm gets reset to something else. And then you're like,
Yeah,
right, can we work on this now? That's often what will happen with people. It's like, oh no, none of that thing's a problem now, but now I've got this thing. And but that's
yes.
beautiful though to see that it's like, okay, we're evolving. That's what we want to have happen. That our clients are evolving and that we're shifting and growing together. I
Yeah.
think that's great. So
Mm.
coming back to your time in Africa, when you got home, did you feel like it changed the way you practice at all, or was there anything that you brought back with you?
It changed everything for me. So some of the biggest changes, other than deciding to, so that one of the reasons I decided to take on the studies, I wasn't intending to do the studies originally, but I learned so much in those 2 weeks of Jeremy and Camilla. Camilla also took us out on separate days, and she's an incredible teacher, but she's very different to Jeremy. Um, but she's a really good patient teacher and really talks you through cases to understand why you've arrived at a remedy. But I just felt I was worried that after 2 weeks, I would over time fall back into old habits and the learning from Africa would disappear because it was so intense in the moment. We saw around 120 or so people in 2 weeks. To give your listeners a bit of an idea, I don't have a very big practice, but that would be how many people I would see over 2.5 years. So that's intense for someone like me, but I think for every average homeopath, 120 over 2 weeks would be a lot. So I didn't want to miss out on all the learning I had. I really wanted to cement that learning. Um, the way I look at a case is different now as well. I have found, for instance, I can go into a lot more depth with the client because I'm looking at. I need to identify really what's the cause of that issue, whereas before um, I might have missed a clue, really. I feel like I've just learned how to look for the right symptoms, but really listen to what the client is saying. I think I've always been good at listening to clients, but listening for clues and beyond the words,
Mm,
looking at how things are showing up, really. So I learned a lot in that regard. Certainly, my case management has changed significantly. Um, and I would have been one of those homeopaths in the beginning that would be very easy to question myself and doubt what I prescribed initially. So I could change a remedy. But now, I make sure my first repetization is really good, really solid. I've always put in a huge effort for that, but I back myself a
mm,
lot more and I know exactly what I'm looking for when I'm looking in a follow-up. And that's quite an art. I think it does take a bit of experience as a homeopath to really understand what's changing. So I would have missed in the past things like someone telling me that, oh, I've quit my job. Before I would have gone, oh, that's good. So moving on. But now I'm like, oh, that's significant,
mm,
you know? Um, so yes, it has certainly enhanced my practice significantly. I feel for the betterment, not just in terms of outcomes for my clients, but also the way I can interact with them and the trust they can then place in me, and the relationship I can form with people. So, yeah, it's just provided a much more solid foundation. And it's so good to stick with classical homeopathy. I think when you first start out as a homeopath, you can often be swayed with, oh, there's got to be a quicker way. There's got to be a quicker way to get to an answer. And so you can easily get swayed with other things that are out there of like, you need to do this, you need to do that. And it's always swaying you away from classical homeopathy. But actually, the quickest way to proper healing is classical homeopathy.
Mm.
It is really because that's the only way you really get to treat the person as a whole. And I saw that with 120 people in Africa, and nothing will convince me otherwise.
Mm.
So it was incredible.
And that's so beautiful, finding that one remedy,
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
the thing that's the biggest challenge. Like, where's that one similimum, that one remedy that's going to bring about
yeah,
change, that's going to stimulate the vital force to come back into balance?
exactly.
But it's a very worthwhile cause, or
Yeah,
that's not quite the right word, but, a very worthwhile goal
yeah,
to be working towards. And that
yeah.
doesn't mean, by the way, one remedy for the rest of your life,
No,
but that's the one remedy in this situation that
yeah,
that will bring about balance. And so
yeah,
one of the key concepts of homeopathy, which, has lasted over 200 years for a very good reason, because it was set in, the foundations are set in truth.
yeah.
Truth is truth. And
I-
so why
yeah.
mess with it?
The
Yeah.
principles of homeopathy have not changed
Mm,
since they first started, really.
yeah.
And I think that gives a lot of certainty
Mm,
to the system. Um, it's consistent. Other forms of medicine have not had that sort of solid foundation where, goalposts have shifted or ways of measuring things have shifted. But with homeopathy, our principles have stayed true
mm,
right from when Hahnemann first started
yeah.
applying homeopathy, as far as I understand, anyway.
Yeah.
Mm.
So if there's one common belief about homeopathy that you'd like to change, what would that be?
Um, I feel I feel people often think homeopathy is just the remedy, but it's not. A homeopathic remedy is not necessarily homeopathy. Homeopathy is a whole system of medicine. I think it's really important for people to understand, unless that remedy has been arrived at through applying the principles of homeopathy, it is not homeopathy.
Mm,
And I feel like especially now, there's a big myth building out there that as long as you're using a homeopathic remedy, it's homeopathy, and it's not. So, I feel
mm,
for me, that's really important. And
yeah.
having witnessed that after 2 weeks with Jeremy and Camilla in Africa, those principles are just the foundation of homeopathy, really.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. So, if people would like to find out more about homeopathy for health in Africa or donate, I know they've got a Christmas kind of thing going on at the moment, but it could be after Christmas.
Yes.
How do they do that?
So the website is called homeopathyforhealthinafrica.org.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd encourage people to go to their website. There's a donate button on there. They love it if people are interested, and even if they can spare $20 a month to make it a regular donation, because there's a lot of costs involved with running all these clinics. But all of the money that people donate goes directly to the clinic. There's no overheads that it covers or anything. All of that it's all direct. So it's remedies, bottles, the vehicles to get out to the clinics, um, everything that's involved. And they do extra fundraising. So they've had situations where people, for instance, you go to their houses and, the roof is going to cave in on this person's house, and therefore he's sleeping in a wet bed because the rain comes through all the time. He's never going to get well sleeping in a wet bed. And so they did some fundraising, for instance, to put a proper roof over the house. Um, but seeing starving people is really, really hard. We did, even when we were over there, we also helped where we could. Um, there was yeah, I could go into that, but that's a whole other story. But there is a donate button on Homeopathy for Health in Africa. It would be the only NGO I know of where everything goes 100% to those it's intended for. Jeremy and Camilla, their time is all free, so they donate their time to these clinics. They run, of course, their own private consultations, and they have other, they run a course, etc. They have other ways of earning their own income, but as far as the clinic is concerned, their time is free. So I don't know if the homeopaths who are being trained in Africa understand the, magnitude of having people like Jeremy and Camilla training them. I certainly would love to be in that position, but I am now. But those donations go 100% to the charity.
Beautiful. And you can choose to donate porridge, the food, can't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you choose either homeopathy or food, either way, gladly appreciated, I'm sure, and received. Yeah.
So the uji porridge that they include over there, these are people who are malnourished at the best of times. They don't often get more than one meal a day. In some families, they might not even get one meal a day. So the uji porridge is really good in terms of sustaining them for a longer period of time. It comes with honey as well, which of course is extremely healing. So when you've got a limited amount of nutrition available to you, it's really helpful to get those sort of things. And it goes a long way for families. If it can feed the family for a month, even, it's phenomenal. So
beautiful. And tell me about your practice. How can people find you?
So I run a practice called the Homeopathy Practice. I'm based in Howick in Auckland, but I also do online consultations. I run out of a clinic called Tranquility Mind and Body. That's the holistic health centre that you mentioned in the start that I co-manage with my colleague Janine Gawn. But I'm based in Howick. My website is thehomeopathypractice.co.nz. That's the easiest way to contact me. Yep. You can reach out to me via the website.
Lovely. And I'll put links to your website in the show notes below.
Yes, I'm also on Facebook and on Instagram.
So, beautiful.
Yep. And LinkedIn.
Thank you so much. It was amazing. I mean, we could talk for hours. I loved hearing all about that and your practice, and just so inspiring to hear stories of people making a difference in the world in these places that really need it. And yeah, do you think you'll go back again?
I'd love to.
You're 100%.
I would love to go back, and next time I'd like to go back for longer.
Yeah.
Because you can see what a difference you make. You really, really impact people's lives. So I'd love nothing better than to be able to go back and do more of it. So
wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And you'll be hearing
Sonia.
more from me in future podcasts. But thank you so much for being my first guest and being just so open to I'll do that when I approached you. Very good. Much
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to your other podcasts as well. So
thanks. You. See ya. Bye.
See you. Bye.
Hey, that was fun. Thank you for joining me today as I interview homeopaths from around the world. Just a quick note before we finish that this content is for education only and isn't a substitute for professional medical advice. Always consult your healthcare provider. If you'd like to learn more or explore working together, you can visit me at holistichomeopathy.co.nz. And if this episode resonated with you, feel free to share it or follow the podcast so you don't miss future episodes. Take care, and I hope you'll join me next time.